Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a case that's more than just a true crime thriller. It's a twisted reflection of family secrets, privilege, and, well, the weight of perception.
Yeah.
We're diving into the Menendez Brothers case. You've shared some seriously intriguing articles and research with
Oh,
us.
absolutely. Get ready, because this one takes some unexpected turns.
Right from the start, this case throws curveballs.
Yeah.
I mean, the brothers' actions after the murders,
Yeah.
it's almost like they wanted to get caught. What's the psychology behind that kind of behavior?
It's a fascinating question, and honestly, there are no easy answers.
Right.
Were they driven by unconscious guilt, a
Okay.
desperate need to be caught and punished? Or was it a more twisted form of denial, trying to overcompensate for their actions with a facade of normalcy? Their lavish spending sprees could be interpreted through both lenses, and both are deeply unsettling.
It's like that saying, the louder he talked about his honesty, the faster we counted the silverware. Except in this case, it's Rolexes and Porsches instead of silverware.
Exactly. It makes you question every move, every decision.
Yeah.
And it challenges us to look beyond the surface.
Yeah.
Before we even get to that fateful night, we need to understand the world these brothers inhabited. Their family life, particularly their relationship with their father, José Menendez, is crucial here.
All right, so let's rewind. Paint a picture for us. Who were the Menendez family before that August night in 1989?
On paper, they were the embodiment of California success. José, a self-made millionaire, had climbed the ranks in the entertainment industry, eventually reaching top positions in companies like RCA Records and Live Entertainment. They lived in a Beverly Hills mansion, a far cry from José's own upbringing. This was a man who understood the power of image, of achieving the American dream.
And Kitty, the mother. What was her role in this family portrait?
Kitty was a former schoolteacher who seemed, at least outwardly, to embrace the role of devoted wife and mother.
Right.
They had all the trappings of affluence, private schools for Lyle and Erik, tennis lessons, you name it. But beneath this veneer of success, there were whispers of a darker reality.
Whispers of what? Gives the behind-the-scenes take.
José, while undeniably driven, was also known for being incredibly controlling. Some have even described his parenting style as tyrannical, demanding perfection and obedience in a way that could easily create a pressure cooker atmosphere at home.
And Kitty, was she caught in the crosshairs of this dynamic?
That's hard to say for sure, but sources suggest she struggled with her own demons, mental health challenges, and potentially substance abuse. Whether she was complicit in José's behavior or simply overwhelmed by it is a question that lingers. What's clear is that this wasn't a family of open communication or healthy coping mechanisms.
So we have this complex power dynamic between the parents. What about Lyle and Erik? Were they showing signs of cracking under the pressure?
Absolutely. Take Lyle, for example. He followed in José's footsteps to a degree, even attending Princeton. But he was caught plagiarizing, which led to his expulsion. Now, some might dismiss this as a lapse in judgment, but considering the pressure he was under to succeed, it could also be a sign of deeper rebellion.
And Erik?
Yeah.
He was the athlete, right? The tennis prodigy.
Yes, and according to some accounts, José pushed him relentlessly in that world. It's important to note that Erik was only 12 when the family moved to Beverly Hills, a pivotal age for identity formation. Then we see this other side of him, his involvement in those Calabasas burglaries. We're not talking petty theft here.
Right.
This was organized, premeditated,
Wow.
and targeted wealthy homes, including one that netted them over $2,000 in cash and jewelry.
Okay, now that's a significant detail. It seems like classic acting out, rebelling against the very privilege they were surrounded by.
Precisely. These weren't just teenage pranks. They were deliberate acts that showed a disregard for the law and, some might argue, a subconscious need to assert control in an environment where they felt powerless. And that complexity, that push and pull between privilege and rebellion, that's what makes this case so fascinating. We can't ignore those early cracks in their facades. They foreshadow the tragedy that's about to unfold.
Which brings us to that night in August 1989. The details of the murders themselves are brutal. It's easy to get caught up in the courtroom drama that follows. But let's take a moment to understand the sheer violence of that act.
It's essential to acknowledge the gravity of what happened in that Beverly Hills mansion. José and Kitty weren't just victims in a news story. They were brutally murdered in their own home. The level of violence suggests something more than just a crime of opportunity or even a moment of anger.
I remember reading about it. The sheer number of shots fired, it painted a very disturbing picture.
It wasn't just the number, but the placement and the type of weapon used. Shotguns at close range. Jose was shot in the back of the head, execution style. Kitty was shot multiple times as well, including in the face. It points to a level of rage, of hatred, that's hard to comprehend.
And the police at first suspected a mob hit, right?
Yeah.
Given Jose's Hollywood connections, it's not completely out there.
Not at all. The scene itself was chaotic, meant to look like a robbery gone wrong. And the brothers even staged things to support that narrative. Remember, this is a family steeped in the world of entertainment. They understood how to craft a convincing performance.
So the brothers thought they could pull off the ultimate deception, but then they make this drastic shift from grieving sons to, well, anything but. It's almost like they couldn't resist flaunting their newfound freedom and wealth.
That's what makes their behavior after the murders so perplexing. It's one thing to try and cover up a crime, but their spending spree was almost like a confession in itself. They bought Rolexes, designer clothes, Lyle got himself a Porsche, they even invested in a restaurant. It was as if they were trying to create a new life for themselves, funded by the very tragedy they'd orchestrated.
So if they were trying to avoid suspicion, they were doing a terrible job of it. It's like they wanted to get caught. Or maybe there's something more to it. Some people spend recklessly to fill a void, to numb emotional pain. Could that be what was happening here?
It's certainly a possibility. Guilt and grief can manifest in strange ways. Perhaps their extravagant spending was a way to distract themselves from the enormity of what they'd done. Or maybe, as you suggested, it was a subconscious cry for help, a way to self-sabotage and ultimately face the consequences of their actions.
So we have this strange cocktail of potential motives. A desire for freedom, the burden of guilt, maybe even a twisted sense of entitlement. And then, just when you think you're starting to understand, the case takes another sharp turn. This is where Erik's therapist comes into play, right?
Yes. This is where the story takes us from the realm of speculation into the heart of confession. Erik, grappling with the weight of his actions, begins seeing a therapist, Dr. Jerome Oziel. And what started as a therapeutic intervention quickly became a crucial turning point in the case. Because, unbeknownst to Erik, Dr. Oziel was recording those therapy sessions.
Wait, hold on. He was recording them? Isn't that a massive breach of trust? What about doctor-patient confidentiality?
It was a huge ethical and legal quagmire, and it became the center of a heated legal battle. The brothers' lawyers argued that those tapes were inadmissible, a violation of Erik's right to privacy. But the prosecution argued that Erik, in confessing to the murders and subsequently threatening Dr. Oziel, had waived that right.
So the courtroom becomes this battleground of legal interpretations, with the fate of the Menendez brothers hanging in the balance. What did the courts ultimately decide? So the courts allowed these secret recordings as evidence. That must have been a blow to the defense. Did they try to suppress the tapes entirely?
Oh, they fought tooth and nail, arguing that the tapes were a violation of doctor-patient confidentiality. But the court ultimately ruled that because Erik had confessed to an ongoing crime, the murders, and had threatened Dr. Oziel to keep him silent, those actions fell outside the protected bounds of therapy. It set a legal precedent that's still debated today. It's a fascinating legal dilemma. So, with those recordings admitted as evidence, did the brothers have any options left besides pleading guilty?
That's where the defense took an unexpected, and some might say risky, gamble. Instead of denying the murders, they shifted the narrative entirely. Their defense rested on the argument that Lyle and Erik had acted not out of greed, but out of fear, as a desperate act of self-preservation.
Self-preservation? How could killing their parents be framed as an act of self-preservation?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And to answer it, the defense dove headfirst into the murky waters of abuse. They alleged that both Lyle and Erik had endured years of physical, emotional, and even sexual abuse at the hands of their father.
Those are incredibly serious accusations. What evidence did they present to support those claims?
Both brothers took the stand and delivered, emotionally charged testimonies, detailing years of alleged abuse. Lyle claimed that his father had molested him from a young age and that he lived in constant fear of his father's, volatile temper. Erik painted a similar picture, claiming he too had been sexually abused by Jose for years.
And how did the prosecution counter such a powerful narrative? Did they believe the abuse claims were true?
The prosecution presented a case of, calculated greed. They argued that the brothers, particularly Lyle, were motivated by their inheritance and a desire to break free from their father's control, but not out of fear for their lives. They pointed to the brothers' behavior after the murders, the spending sprees, the lack of remorse as evidence that contradicted claims of self-defense or a genuine fear for their safety.
So the trial became this battle of narratives, a classic case of he said, but with incredibly high stakes. How did the jury navigate such conflicting accounts?
The first trials, held separately for Lyle and Erik, both resulted in hung juries.
Oh, no.
The jurors were deeply divided, unable to reach a unanimous verdict. It speaks to the power of the abuse allegations and the complexity of parsing truth from manipulation.
A hung jury twice. It shows just how polarizing this case was, how it challenged people's perceptions of justice, guilt, and the devastating impact of abuse. But the story doesn't end there, does it?
No, it doesn't. The prosecution, determined to secure a conviction, decided to retry both brothers. However, the second trial was markedly different. For one, it wasn't televised, which significantly reduced the media circus surrounding the case. Secondly, the judge in the second trial imposed stricter limitations on the defense's ability to present evidence of abuse.
So the focus shifted away from the emotionally charged allegations of abuse and more toward the crime itself.
Exactly. And this time, the prosecution's narrative resonated more strongly with the jury. Both Lyle and Erik were found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
A truly Shakespearean fall from grace. This case, even decades later, continues to spark debate. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about family dynamics, the cyclical nature of abuse, and the impossibility of ever truly knowing what happens behind closed doors.
And it highlights the challenges of achieving true justice in a system that often struggles to reconcile conflicting narratives, especially when those narratives involve deeply personal and traumatic experiences. The Menendez brothers case remains a stark reminder that truth can be elusive, and the line between victim and perpetrator can be terrifyingly thin.
It's a case that stays with you long after the verdicts are read, prompting us to examine our own biases and confront the uncomfortable realities that often lie hidden beneath the surface of even the most seemingly perfect lives. For our listeners, we encourage you to explore the source material, delve into the psychological complexities, and form your own conclusions about this captivating and unsettling case.